Salam alaikum, everyone. I want to welcome you to another installation of the Zoom In and the Zoom In on the Halal Metropolis project. Today, we're very excited to welcome our own Rashida Tlaib, a Congresswoman from the state of Michigan, to talk with us this afternoon. How are you doing, Rashida?
Good, alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for having me, and Assalamu alaikum to all the listeners and folks out there that find our Muslim community interesting.
Well, thank you for agreeing to talk to us. So first, I just want to find out how you and your family are doing. I guess in your case, you're leading in place. What's it like for you?
I mean, first I'm a mom, so homeschooling has been a bit of a challenge. I almost feel like I have to repeat third grade math. I'm a little bit embarrassed to not know some of the solutions, some of these problems, but the teachers have been great partners in that. But yeah, it's been, for me, I always acknowledge and know that it's a blessing and a privilege that I'm actually able to work from home and telework, where a lot of my neighbors are not able to do that. Some of them are really real essential workers that have to go to work every single day, risking their lives. So I do acknowledge that and let my kids know that we're really blessed, because a lot of moms out there can't do what I'm able to do, which is be here and be able to still work and help them with school.
And I feel equally blessed, and maybe even more so because my daughter is grown up. And so the homeschooling thing, man, what a challenge for everybody. Oh wow, my hat's off to every parent out there who's having to deal with this. Well, so the first person I knew personally, and probably you knew personally, many of us in the Arab community of Detroit or in the metro area knew personally, who actually passed away from this virus, was Isaac Robinson, a politician, a very energetic, young, very progressive politician who was out there. I mean, I've known him since he worked for Conyers as a staffer. We heard this morning that Mayor O'Reilly and his wife were affected by the virus. And I know that Brenda Jones, who's running for your seat, also has been affected by the virus. So, I mean, to be a politician, your job is so much to be out and about with people, to shake hands. I know you take selfies with everybody in the universe. What is it like just to do that part of your job, to pull back from people? That must be especially challenging for you.
Yeah, and I think, I'm not only a very energetic, very touchy Arab American, like to hug and be with people, very much an extrovert like my mother. So it's been a little hard not having that direct human contact. But, as a public servant, I'm today went and delivered some shields to Western Wayne Clinic. And in one of my block clubs, who's helping deliver groceries to their neighbors, it's delivered some masks for them. So I'm still going there, obviously, making sure that I'm protected. But yeah, a lot of many of my colleagues have been impacted. Nydia Velasquez, who's really taking the lead on small business stuff, got infected. She's from New York. My good colleague from Utah, Ben McAdams, I think was one of the first. And it was really hard to hear that they had to go through that difficult time. It was very scary because it was really early on when folks didn't really understand. We're still very uncertain about what the impact is on people's public health and why some survive and some don't.
Yeah, wow. So I know that you represent a large swath of Detroit and a lot of the downriver community. And I've been watching the numbers. You've been watching the numbers today. We saw the new numbers from the state, which said that Detroit had passed a very sad landmark. 1,000 people in the city of Detroit have now passed away from this virus, and it's hit the city very hard. We also know, looking at the statistics, that I think the last I saw was like 34% of the people who are getting infected with the virus in the state of Michigan are African American, and 40% of the people who are dying from the virus are African American. So I'd like you to address that issue a little bit.
Yeah, 13 district strong is the third poorest congressional district in the country. Out of 435 colleagues, we're right there at the core. Isaac Robinson was one of my constituents, one of my residents. I've known him, since running for state representative in 2008, and he supported me and was part of Teamsters. I live in the same neighborhood as he does. And so it really hit home in Detroit. We started hearing not only about Isaac and the experience with his family and his sudden passing, but also for so many of my other neighbors, from folks working at auto industries, in the plants, hearing about one person that died, it really, really shook the whole, workforce at many of the plants. So it is, really devastating. But if anything, coronavirus has shown the ugly face of not only structural racism, but the fact that environmental racism, the lack of access to quality healthcare in predominantly Black neighbors all over the nation have been directly impacted because the continued disinvestment and not recognizing some of these structures set in place really make sure that they don't have access to thrive. Many of my residents live right border to Dearborn in 4217, which is the most polluted zip code in the state of Michigan. High rates of asthma, high rates of respiratory issues. So they have a lot of pre-existing conditions, again, surrounded by corporate polluters. And so the coronavirus, they were already in survivor mode, but the coronavirus just obviously was a huge, horrific, and continue to be a horrific challenge for many of them. So to see that 40% of Michiganders who are African-American dying of COVID, when our African-Americans only make up about 15% of the state population, it's telling you, then something is wrong. My residents don't want to be studied anymore. They don't need another task force. They really want action. They want access to testing, to quality health care. The fact that, so many of my neighbors are the ones that are workers that have to report to work still because they're essential workers. This is the fact, the fact of the matter is the economic divide is real. And if there's any frontline community that shows how real and what the impact is because of coronavirus, it's my district.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And a lot of those, your Dearborn isn't in your district, but all the things you're saying extend into big parts of Dearborn as well, where we have the same, people live downwind of the same exact factories. And there are people who don't have the kinds of skills where they can get the jobs where they can work at home like we can.
The South End, our South End Dearborn neighbors that neighbor right to my district. They border most of my whole district. I've been hearing more and more about, especially the Yemeni community being hit very, very hard right now.
I have too, and I've been seeing it online too. Yeah, exactly. Well, so there are several issues here. People need access to health care. They need access to paid leave so that when they're concerned about being sick, they don't have to worry about bringing the disease back to work and infecting more of their colleagues, or they need the time to recover from the disease themselves. They need a living wage. We're just finding it's not a canary in the coal mine. We're not in the coal mine. This is the real world. This is just the evidence that these policies that we've been living with. And especially in the last 20 years, things have gotten so much worse for Americans. And this is illustrating how serious the crisis is. So how are you addressing this at the congressional level?
Well, much of my policies that I've been pushing forward have been pretty bold because, there seems to be a lack of urgency still, but I have this sense of my folks can't wait anymore. They, again, like I said, Professor, they've been on survivor mode. And so to have a pandemic happen while these are the same folks who've been fighting for $15 minimum wage, I just hope people don't forget. Those are my grocery workers. Those are my restaurant workers. Those are the folks who've been telling you, please give us health care. Please give us $15 minimum wage. One job should be enough. These are my folks that work at the hospital, not only at the hospital, like healthcare workers, but these are the ones that are cleaning the hospitals. These are the ones that work at the airports. Yeah. So much of these folks have been asking for, human dignity and respect. And, I hope people don't forget that. But, I introduced the Automatic Boost to Communities Act, which has gotten a lot of local elected official support from across the nation. A lot of really great polling has come out to show that Republicans, Democrats, Independents truly believe in this program, where it basically would give folks reoccurring payments of $2,000 a month through a debit card. And I say debit card because a lot of our neighbors and folks are unbanked and underbanked, but also so many things are online. Some things still become inaccessible because our folks don't have access to credit. And so the debit card is a great way. And again, this idea kind of came about for me. For me because of food assistance. I remember my parents having food assistance and the food stamps and ripping it out, and they became the bridge card. And later on, and how that really was transformative in a way that even now folks can now, some like Kroger's and others are accepting the bridge card through delivery. And so folks can stay safe, stay home and be safe. But it's $2,000 during the pandemic. And then a year after the pandemic, it will be additional $1,000, because folks need to realize, the continued corporate like bailouts, all this stuff, they hoard the money. And they'll say, oh, this is for us to keep folks employed. But we saw what the airlines did. We saw what the big corporations and folks did. What they did is they gutted the unions. They gutted their healthcare. They said, oh, we're going to make you temporary status, or we'll give you tier system where you're, hourly versus, really being a career for many of our neighbors. And so and they hoard it and they give it to shareholders. And so one thing I know is if I give money to my neighbors, bad or good, they don't save it, they spend it.
Absolutely.
And
that's right into your other neighbor's pocket.
Well, for food, for other things. I mean, it is something that it's a sure thing that if I give it to them, I know my small businesses who actually said to us recently, these SBA, these small business loans are great, but can you give money to folks that can actually, so that they can spend it? And many of their workers and others are asking for the same thing. So I just know they'll stimulate the local economy. They'll help small businesses, and it will stay in the community where, there's no guarantee ever. And we've seen it, and we learned our lesson, I think, during the Great Recession, that corporations were not going to take care of our residents that work for them, that they're not the ones who are going to save us. It's only us.
Stock market. I mean, the stock market dipped a little bit, but it's climbing back up again. It's like the people who have those investments, they're taking care of themselves, obviously.
Yeah.
What we need the government to do is to take care of the rest of us.
Yeah.
So we're kind of limited on time here. So if there's another issue that you want to mention, I want to definitely give you the opportunity to mention it. But I also want to ask you a little bit about Ramadan, because it is Ramadan. So yes. Do you want to bring up another issue?
Yeah, and for all my Muslim sisters and brothers, one of the things that Congresswoman Debbie Dingell and I have been working closely together and finally got leadership to agree is to make water a human right. It took this pandemic, even though you should know thousands of our neighbors, some are ashamed to talk about it, but they can't afford their water bills. And they have, right now facing shutoffs, some still having issues where they can't wash their hands, even though it's a pandemic going on. And so we, introduced this bill would be a permanent fix to water shutoffs. And I think that's really important. But during this Ramadan, I keep saying, as we enter this month and we're in this month like this is the time to expose our faith through service of others, through showing up for others. If there's a way to do it, I mean, a simple even message that you believe water is a human right, a message that you believe that we have to invest in people, and that you believe when African Americans are saying this is happening to us because of structural racism. I know Muhammad, peace be upon him, if he was among us, he'd be the first to say it. He'd be the first to say, why are we excluding undocumented immigrants? Why are we, choosing those that have versus those that need? And so this is the time for us to expose who we are as Muslims around this nation, around the world, through our actions, through our words. People really need to be able to connect with each other. And it's interesting to see, even though now we're distancing and all this is happening, I feel closer to people in a way that because we're all very much in pain and seeing our loved ones dying, our loved ones getting sick, watching our local communities struggle right now. I mean, even our first responders, our healthcare workers, begging for help, for protection gear, all these things. If there's anything during Ramadan that we could do is speak up and not be silent. And we can do that through our family without fighting, please. But really just engaging them to understand what's actually happening, because this is a global pandemic. I don't think folks realize we're going to be with this for years. The impact is in many ways irreparable harm to so many of our folks.
We don't know where it's going either. We really don't. The uncertainty is also really challenging. Well, we will highlight the water bill that you mentioned.
It's a human right, yeah.
Yeah, water is the human right. We'll highlight that on the link to this interview. And I just want you to also know that through these interviews that we're doing, we're also highlighting a lot of charities, because as you know, Ramadan is a month of giving for Muslims. And in particular, we're focusing on the charities that are trying to help people in need right now in the local communities.
And right now and that's what's wonderful. We, the people, have been in Brightmoor Pantry And I'll send you the information. They are the ones delivering water to our folks.
Okay.
And, you know, these are people that they can't get their water back on because the piping, because it's been off for so long that it's contaminated. And so I just really sad. But there have been a number of articles, people talking about how, you know, many of these families have children that are facing, and they're afraid to come forward because they feel like their children will be taken away from them because they don't have water in the home.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I wish you a Ramadan Kareem. I thank you for everything you're doing. I'm glad that you're staying safe and taking care of your kids. And I know it's a good time too to just, because you're out in the world so much. This Ramadan, you get to be at home for a little bit. That's probably a welcome relief for you. But just sending you lots of love from Dearborn, and look forward to giving you a hug sometime very soon.
Yeah, same here. Thank you so much. Take care, Professor.
Thank you, Rashida.
Salam.